And my voice is as loud as too.
So, remember when Miss Neal stopped by and she said, build your network? That was her first thing. You all were just handed the card of the resident director for Emory University. Build your network. Think about these things. These things are all important. That's a good card to have. Hold on to that whenever you have a problem. Maybe not to get favors for things, but when you have a problem, that's important. It was a good try, though. I give you credit for the process. Yes.
His last name was Roush,
Roush.
correct?
Roush.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just making
Roush.
sure. I want to call him.
So, now you have the much discussed, and finally here, Dr. Marsteller. They've heard about some of the grants you've written. Cora has talked about you, Felicia's talked about you, so you've been discussed.
So you're like a legend.
So,
In my own mind.
there you go. Alright, so Dr. Gordon and I are going to leave you guys for a little bit. We've got some stuff we need to do, so you all are in good hands, and we will be back. We trust you, so you will all be corrupted by the time we get back. No, you will get some really, really good information, and have fun, ask a lot of questions. We'll see you guys shortly. Fun.
I'll miss you.
No, you won't. Alright, so these are the handouts, and all of this is also on the Glue site already, under activities, learning about science, learning about you. Yes, still take them though. Those are for your notebooks. Always.
Mother has some paper too.
They do.
Even if you don't wear it. So printer advice too. Do you know that you can now buy a really good black and white printer for less than $150?
Is that okay to like have no drawer?
Don't ask our tech guy. I have no idea if it's legal, but I don't see why it wouldn't be. I have. Oh, you buy your own stuff.
Bless you.
No, good afternoon. Hey, I can tell people have been here before me. You're right ready to go. Okay. So they've trusted you with me for a couple of hours, and what I'm going to today and a couple hours next week, right? So I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own career, because the workshop that we're doing today, and it is a workshop that you should have to play too, but, is about finding your passions. And it's an exercise that I've been using with freshman students and more advanced students even for about 8 to 10 years. It kind of evolves a little bit every time, to try and get you to think about what you're going to do and how you're going to plan your next 4 years or more. So we're going to do some interactive exercises. We're also going to look at a few PowerPoint slides, and we're going to play some games. We're also going to begin on exercise 1 and 2 from that handout. So you can see what's coming up for fun. And I want to get to know you and figure out who you are, but I want to get this started too. So I may do that as we go through the Finding Your Passion exercise, ask you to tell me who you are and what you're up to. Okay? Does that sound fair?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So I'm Pat Marsteller. But they told me you knew. So I'm going to start with some stuff that I put together about finding your passion, kind of focusing on undergraduate research, but it has other things associated with it too, so it should fit you. But the second subtitle there is called Serendipity, Chance, Choice, and Compromise in the Evolution of Education. That's my book, right? That's about me. What's serendipity? Anybody know? Someone heard that term before? Serendipity. Why did it happen? Yeah, it's more like something that happened, like chance favors the prepared mind, but it's more like things that happen by accident. Right? So some of what you may encounter as you plan your own career might be accident. There might be choices that you make along the way that poke you off into another direction. So a little bit of serendipity, but a little bit of choice, and sometimes compromise. Right? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story first, because when I was your age, first year in college, I thought I was going to do pre-med, go to medical school, eventually do medical research, and eventually end up as the director of an institute at NIH. So I didn't do that. Because otherwise I wouldn't be here, right? I would be Francis Collins. That's the director of NIH. And I'm not there. I did other things along the way. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about, not everything, but a little bit about how that happened, so that you get an idea that as we talk about making your plan, what you think you want to be right this very minute might get influenced by what happens to you in life and about what you find out that you enjoy and that you find out that you're good at and you find out that you're passionate about, because you might not know everything now. What do you think? Yeah, really. Table. You might not. But we'll see how this thing moves. So I want to start out with this little thing.
This is Lady. She's a unicorn. And Pegasus. And why is she strapped to the roof of my RAV4? Well, if you have kids,
Yeah.
then you know why.
I said skip it.
Now the real question, where's this going in the house? The RAV4. Toyota. Let's go
You want a
places.
Toyota? Is that your picture? Maybe that's part of the video too.
Hello, this is Sir Ken Robinson, and this is your teachable moment on what it feels like to be in your element. I think there are lots of ways in which you can tell that you're in your element. I talk about the element as being that point where something you're naturally good at comes together with a passion, where you have your heart and soul in something. And one of the ways you can tell is that time changes. I don't mean it happens all the time, because sometimes to be in your element, there are things you have to do to get ready for it. You know, there are activities you have to do to get the place clear, get settled, warm up, do something. But there's a point which I call being in the zone, which is where you get deep into the heart of it, where you're lost in the activity, where time seems to shift. You know, where an hour might feel like 5 minutes. You know, often if you're doing things you don't like, 5 minutes can feel like an hour. But you see it actually in terms of physical changes. You know, people's breathing shifts. They feel more centered in their energy. They feel more present. And that's a big part of being here and now, being in the moment, rather than being distracted from it. And often I think people spend a lot of time not in this moment because they're not doing something they feel passionate about. And it can be anything. You know, some people get that through extreme physical activities, you know, through extreme sports, or playing tennis, or football, or baseball. That's their way into the zone. For others, it's a process of much more quiet reflection. And this is really important to me because there isn't a single way of being in your element, and I don't think we're all confined to one. But you know when you're there because you feel centered, focused, you feel that time is behaving differently, and that you're doing something that resonates deeply with your sense of being here and now, being present. And it's often a really powerful aesthetic sense, you know, an aesthetic sense that makes you resonate with this experience.
So, now, quickly, run around the room and introduce yourself and tell me something that puts you in the zone.
Step up.
Okay, all right.
So I'm O'Connell. Something that really puts me in the zone, thinking about existence, human purpose,
Oh,
That's really fascinating to me.
okay, something that puts you in the zone is philosophy. What does it mean to be human? Cool.
I'm Alana Jordanov. Something that puts me in the zone would be playing the violin, picking up a new piece and going through it and annotating it, I guess, would be
Cool.
trying to, I don't know, you just lose yourself.
You lose yourself in something that you really, really love, and it's music. Yeah.
My name is Daniel Pizarro, and what puts me in the zone is sitting in the shower. That's true.
Singing in the shower. I actually love to sing too, but I probably shouldn't. It's when I was thinking, you might be passionate about it, but you might not be good at it. I'm not good at it. Are you good at it too?
He thinks it is.
He thinks he is. Okay. How about you?
Kelvin Pittman.
Oh, is that Kelvin or Calvin?
Kelvin. Kelvin, K-E-L.
Kelvin. Kelvin. Okay.
I get in the zone, and we like basketball, start hitting a couple shots, in the rhythm.
Okay. Basketball. You and Barack.
My name is Gary Jordan, and I get centered with sports I'm good at. So, baseball.
Baseball, I can see from the
Oh yeah, I love baseball.
from the shirt.
I play basketball and some beach volleyball, play with friends.
Oh, okay.
Not really that good.
All right. Well, we'll take you and then her.
I'm Tyler Louie, and
Tyler.
I get in the zone from dancing.
Dancing, what kind of dancing?
Hip hop, interpretive, all that stuff.
Excellent.
My name is Kennedy Lewis, and I get in the zone from just like walking down the street.
Ah,
I
okay.
like to walk.
And then you get your best ideas when you're walking? Me too. I need a little recorder too when I'm out walking the dog, because that's when all of the little stuff comes.
I'm Jamila Wiggins, and I get in the zone by creative writing. I like to write songs, poetry, short stories, novels, and that just really, gets me going. And I sing, but,
You sing while you write?
Well, sometimes I do. I can't play instruments, so I just have this piece of paper with lyrics. I just sing it to myself.
Okay, nice, nice. I hear a lot of artistic talent in this room.
My name is Ava Radix. I really like doing arts and crafts, like all different types. I make bracelets, I paint, everything. And it's just really fun.
I see Christmas presents coming. Interesting, okay. How about here in the black shirt?
Hi, I'm Milena Scona, and I get in the zone with the arts. I love music, jazz, playing sax, and I love art. I paint, I draw, I sketch.
Wow, that's interesting. So this is really an artistic crew here. We have some different translations for our arts and sports, different translations for our career pathways. Yes.
My name is Olivia Lowry, and I get in the zone when I'm lay reading.
When you're
Lay reading.
late, what's that mean?
Reading in a church. Reading in the church or serving.
Oh, okay, so in a scripture reading, etc. Interesting. Okay.
My name is Sarah Strausser, and I love track and field.
Track and field. What's your sport?
I sprint, jump, and throw, but at Emory, I'm focusing on throws.
Nice.
Shuttler.
So we have some teams forming here in town.
My name is Samantha Chal, and I get in the zone when I listen to music from different countries and learn new words.
Oh, okay. So what countries? What kinds of countries?
Well, I have a lot of Russian music, Japanese music, and Korean music.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Okay, so there's some really interesting courses that you may want to play
Yeah.
here. That's cool.
I'm Houston Smith. I play tennis and I used to race stock cars, so that was good.
Stock cars. Wow. Okay. That's a new one on me.
Yay.
Haven't been ever right. Cool.
Kai Ruffin, and I get in the zone when I'm managing a chaotic situation. Like, I like whenever there's a dinner rush at work and everything's really busy, or you're taking care of someone who's sick and it's really busy.
You could have my job. You would be great at that. actually.
I don't know.
Interesting.
Oh, I'm Andy Serafin, and I like to play piano, especially classical and collaborative. So I like playing sonatas with violins and cellos.
So that, you guys, when you were asking about what there is to do on campus, there's a lot of art and music too, right, and theater, right here on campus, much less in that metro area.
My name is Janisha Jumban, and I really enjoy film photography.
Film photography, excellent. So I see some science research communicators as well. You might not know this, but we actually have a strong science and arts program where a lot of students do outreach to the community in terms of communicating science through arts and through some of these other kinds of things. So there's going to be some other interesting ways you can get involved. For example, the Center for Chemical Evolution a couple of years ago invited dance artists, theater artists, performance artists, playwrights, and musicians to come and visit with all the scientists and then create new works around it. And then the second year they did it with undergraduate students rather than inviting in artists. I thought the undergraduate works were lots better and more enthusiastic and more interesting. So there's lots of things you can do in that regard. I know there was a few that haven't put their hands up yet. Yes.
Michael Andrews. What puts me in the zone is when I run. I put my best thinking when I'm running, and then I also like music, I sing. So.
Okay, running and singing right at the same time, probably. And there's a biochemical chemical associated with that. That being in the zone, do you have anything with you?
Oh, wait, it's from
Anybody?
Wait,
Just me. Yay.
My name is Katara, and what puts me in the zone is learning something new. Like, that's my goal in the year, is just to learn something.
Learn something new. I love it. That's a good academic in the zone thing, or you can learn all kinds of things new while you're doing it. Yes.
My name's Ami Ball, and I get in the zone whenever I'm around horses.
Whenever you're around
Horses.
horses. Oh, that's interesting. Well, we even have a writing team. Question a little bit on the, not the kind that my dad was a cowboy and rode rodeos, so not the kind of horses you're probably talking.
Yeah.
He did bridle bull riding and cattle roping and all this kind of stuff, even up until his 81st birthday when he won a national championship. Okay? Yeah. Cowboys.
Hey, my name is Paula Grosny, and I get in the zone by listening to music and watching YouTube videos.
Okay. Well, I'm going to call on you to find us some YouTube videos. I like the music this time.
My name is Liam Galloway, and I have multiple things that get me in the zone, but one of them that really puts me in the zone is discussing things, like heated topics with people I like to discuss.
So you like to debate?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Haley Matthews, and what gets me in the zone is playing the bassoon. So I played with the Atlanta Symphony Youth Orchestra and Wind Symphony and Emory Youth. So I'm really excited to participate in
Well, nice. So are all you musicians part of musical groups already? Or something? No, not yet. But you're looking to be?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, the jazz ensemble. Is that what you said?
My name is Laverne, and they're helping others.
Helping others and doing community service. What kinds of community service do you do? Is anybody else interested in that kind of like tutoring and helping others and doing outreach to the community? A whole bunch? So for the science interested people in the room, we have chem mentors, we have bio mentors, we have a whole bunch of different ways to tutor other students at Emory and Oxford. But we also have outreach to schools, right? We have an Emory Reads group. We have a a number of different clubs that do outreach to high school and middle school students. And, you know, that may sound like you can't get involved at first because you can't have your car and you can't drive and how would you get there. But there actually is a high school within walking distance. So there are ways, even first-year students can get involved. Right? Lots of stuff that you can do in that regard. Good. Did I miss anybody? I don't think so.
Houston Sugar?
No. Stop first. And tennis. So, notice that only one or two of those were connected with career path. So these are getting in the zone for relaxation and et cetera. What we're going to try and do is figure out some ways that you can get in the zone with something that will help you grow and develop, right? Not all today. You got 4 years here at least, right? You don't have to do everything today, but we're going to talk about some things like that, okay? Back here. Little thing. That's my bedroom. So the second link I'm not going to go to, but I'm going to let you play with it at some point in time. There actually is a course on Coursera that's run once a year on changing the world, right? So I want us to think about today, as we play with this a little bit, how we can use the things that we just introduced that incite our passions to make a difference in the world. And this course examines all kinds of issues, like what are some of the major issues in the U.S. or in the world economy that we need to think about changing, right? And how we can bring our passions to that. So you can even think about the things that get you in the zone that you just talked about. How would you use those to change the world, right? So just for fun, let's think for a minute. What are some things? I'll give you a minute to think and jot down some notes. What are some things that you think need to change in the world to make it a better place, right? And you can think locally. You can say, I know about Atlanta, and I know what needs to change here. Or you can think more globally, world hunger. Healthcare. That's a big one. You can think about anything you want. Just jot down a few notes, and then I'm going to have you talk in groups of 4 and share it for a couple minutes. And then we're going to shout out some of that you talked about. Okay. So what would make a difference? I could think of tons of things. I think we're going to be broadcast to the other group participants eventually, so this will be kind of fun. Tell them what we were doing. Should have brought my cookies for giving prizes to who gets the most. Just for fun. No, we do, actually. Oh, that's wonderful. I forgot to tell you, I'm the oldest of 11 children, so I know how to cook for big groups. Turn around so you guys talk to one another like this, turn around this way, and share with one another. You guys turn around this way. Make a group. Make a group.
So you guys go that way?
Yeah.
Oh, I wrote a propaganda poem in 10th grade. It was not paid. So I just started with these little trees.
We go to accumulate them, yeah. We're gonna shop it out in a few minutes.
Yeah, I was like accessibility to medicine, fix our educational system, equal or relatively more equal distribution of wealth, you know, more equality toward our individuals, you know, which I'm talking about, equal representation, because a lot of people are, you know, not represented, don't have this.
Otherwise, you
I don't believe in that one.
would definitely keep in mind
Okay, and my last one. Self-hate,
Let's focus on
Need outweighs greed. Need outweighs greed.
That's the Democratic agenda.
Need outweighs greed.
The Democratic agenda, because Bonnie's immigration reform, well, actually, you know what, this can be interpreted.
That's good. Yeah, that would be my number one. Yeah, and
Can we teach that? And I actually do think we can teach this if we organize schools and homes better.
We can talk about it, but you're not certain.
fostering other people so that they reach like their highest potentials.
I help communication awareness, like people are really ignorant.
We're not discussion about taboo things because people, if you don't understand, some people, if they don't understand something, they automatically reject it, and so they take their like lack of understanding as hate.
You might think about making that more concrete.
And then integration, just because our is strange.
There's the whole
I
marriage equality, that's all around the world, racial equality, all types of equality.
Yeah, I mean, you know, racial equality is getting a lot better, but as you said, there are some people want to see much dumbasses.
See, and I think we also need to increase the amount of like emphasis we put on free thinking and like actually expanding your mind, because in our educational system we are restricted. Yeah, we are being taught to a test. We are being taught to some form of structure that's actually restricting independent creativity. We're not, you know, spending more time trying to expand the child's mind, but teaching to a guide. You know, our minds are being restricted.
The arts are dying.
They are dying. We need to find ways. Arts are always great, but you know what I think is also very interesting, who supports the arts, is that you've got an art kid, then when they're so, you know, focused on their art, that they just think, oh, I'm going to become a musician, when you don't necessarily need to go into and become a musician, you just use your musical ability to, you know, expand your spatial reasoning and just broaden your mind so that whatever other thing you use it for, whether it be like, well, I mean, you can go to it as a career path, but you want to use it more of like an asset too. So I think that would be like, I educate band kids more so, those that are consumed by it, to let them know that it's not just.
Well-rounded people. Back
Exactly.
in the day, everybody was very well-rounded. They were architects, scientists, artists.
I've always loved the concept of a Renaissance person, you know. When I was younger, I was like, you know what, I read about these and I just kind of want to be all of it, you know, just get into everything, dip my feet in
Everything is so
everything.
specialized now. You need to have a specialized area. Yeah, you
Yeah.
You'll live a long time. Well, he's a Renaissance person.
Yes. One of the greatest compliments I received from one of my teachers that wrote a recommendation letter for me is that he said I was a Renaissance woman, and actually for a very long time I wanted to become this. So for him to say it without me even mentioning that I love the idea, he said it to me and I'm like, oh my gosh, Jesus, thank you. Like, okay.
He's gotten to the point where it's almost like the arts are dissolving activists and people want to
So we're still having some lively conversations, but let's try to come back together. Just for a minute. I'll let you loose again, I promise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get one idea from each group, like that, around and around and around until we get a bunch on the board and we can play. Okay? So. You in the basket group, give us one idea to put on the board.
Health activism.
Health activism. So tell us a little bit about that.
In a lot of countries, whether or not they're considered first world or third world, like people don't know proper ways to protect themselves from certain diseases. People don't have shoes to protect their feet from cuts and get infections, and our group feels that that's one of the biggest issues.
So global health activism?
Yeah.
And of course you can do that right here in home too. I wish we had the best healthcare in the world, but we don't. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, there's lots of things there. Good. One from this group.
People's disregard for others, lack of empathy.
Okay. So I actually heard this in a couple of different groups, so lack of empathy, so we need more empathy and respect for others. Is that what that was? Your group was talking about that too, right? Can you add a little bit to that? What do you think needs to happen with respect to developing empathy or respect for others?
Well, we were talking about how empathy can be taught, because empathy is when you can accept other people's feelings and you can actually relate to them in a way.
And generating acceptance.
Yeah.
And it's also based on experience. Like you can't completely empathize with somebody if you don't really understand what they're going through.
Aha, walk a mile in their shoes. Okay.
That also kind of fits in with the idea of tolerance, of like maybe not necessarily accepting someone else's idea, but being a good enough of a person to respect the idea.
Mm-hmm. And respect for others and other ideas. Yeah. Developing tolerance. That's cool. Your group gets to add a new one because I just made you talk about one that they raised already. So you get to add a new one.
Okay, well, we feel like some people are just being restrained in the way that they learn and the way that they're forced to, make a future for themselves. They're not being taught holistically anymore. Like the concept of a Renaissance individual has faded. And for someone, they can utilize, the talents of the arts to be able to have a broader understanding, like expand their spatial reasoning and like improve their intelligence by having all these sorts of skills. Not just being restrained to just being a lawyer, but having this holistic perspective in everything that they do.
people wrote down on their college application that they wanted to be a specialist. Like, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a businessman, I want to be an engineer, etc. So yes, our society is pushing us to be specialists, right? And I tell them they could be serial specialists. You can also be, you can have multiple specialties, right? Not just one. Up until about a year ago, there was a guy that was the chair of the Medical Education Selection Committee here in the School of Medicine, who was also a well-renowned poet and writer, right? And he taught an undergraduate class on the doctor in literature, right? And there's currently a guy in the School of Medicine, Santa Gupta, who is a very famous communicator, right? So that you can cross boundaries still, right? If you keep those options open and if you make it part of what you want to do and grow and develop. So when I do this Finding Your Passions exercise, I'm not just trying to get you to think about your academic pathway and your academic career. I'm trying to get you to think beyond that. How you will be a whole person in the world that will find the zone as much as you can. How about you guys? Let's throw a new one at us.
We went a lot with like integration and inclusion.
Okay.
There's a lot of divisions, and I think a lot of secondary problems come out of all the divisions we have between cultures, races, ability levels. There's just a lot of division.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about that. I heard you guys saying some really interesting things about.
Well, actually, Connor and I both listed this, and we both went in different directions with it. Mine was like on the abilities. I think that the disabled community is very isolated, not just like in actuality, but in the way we think about things. Like when people use the word, like it's in our language, when people use the word retarded for a frustrating, inconvenient, stupid situation, that's, even though it's outdated as a category of people, it is a category of people. And so whenever you use it to describe a stupid situation, you are aligning an entire population, the largest minority population in the world actually, with stupidity. And that, even if that's not what you meant, you didn't mean to call them stupid, you're subconsciously associating with that idea and excluding them from the rest of the world. And there's lots of divisions outside of just that.
Yeah, of course, so we had racial, ethnic, cultural.
I think one of the ones
religious.
Sexual, yeah.
I think one of the ones we fail to see is academic division as well. And I think a lot of us have been plagued throughout our high school career with this misconception that there's one track to take to get to this one objective. And in the few days we've actually been here, we've been exposed to this diverse array of options. And so I was always under the interpretation that if you wanted to be a doctor, you would be a biologist. You would pursue biology. If you wanted to be
or you need to do policy.
Exactly.
Or you do business, you have to do macro or microeconomics, et cetera, et cetera.
Actually, to expand on what he's saying, like when it comes to even high school, you're already, from the path that they decided that you seem to have your mind set on relatively straight, you're already put in advanced classes and you are already divided from the general population. And what they do in this way is actually a self-fulfilling prophecy, because those that have not been chosen for this path to go, succeed or to excel or to push yourselves, those teachers,
they don't get as much enrichment.
They don't get as much, exactly. They are paid less attention to, and then they're challenged less.
Yeah.
Any mind can expand, but if you're restricted, you won't be able to.
Yeah, so we might, one big challenge in our culture, but also around the world, is that people get pegged into pathways really early, and only those who are targeted for advancement get the best enrichment for it. Even stronger in Europe, right? Because you pass these tests in the 8th grade that decide whether you're going in an academic pathway, a vocational pathway, or to the factory.
I have a friend from Germany who was telling me about this, telling about it. It's like right when they start school, they start putting them in groups, and he said there's actually 3 groups. One for smart people, the other one's for average. He said the bottom one, he said they pretty much gave up hope on them.
And we used to do it even more outright in U.S. schools. Now it's kind of hidden. But we used to, so when I went to high school, they had a A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2 tracks, different courses. Us A1 people were the most disruptive people in the school. It wasn't supposed to be like that. We were supposed to be the most talented. We were just the most bored. We got more trouble than others, but you can get over that. But it really used to be these flat-out tracks, and people would get assigned to them in elementary school and middle school. And if you've never had the enrichment and opportunities that most of you have been afforded, it's hard to break into those top ranks in academics.
Building off of integration and also what Maureen was saying, that individuals should also practice with the expression of arts, whatever your personal opinion is of the word art. It helps connect the self to a part of life that makes for a well-rounded individual.
I really think the meaning of art has drifted from it. Like when you think art, you think swirly and like not tangible, but arts isn't everything. So I think that for some reason, like we think in categories, just like before, arts is something completely different. Medicine's an art, sports is an art. It's any kind of way that you express yourself. It says we shouldn't think of it as one category, like art is painting, art is music. No, art is any way you express yourself.
It's something we really need to think about in our society, given what's happened in educational circles due to the economy and due to some wars. Because arts have been removed from the elementary school curriculum and the middle school curriculum in many places. Right? All kinds of art, music, crafts, all kinds of expression, etc. So that's something we really might want to think about as a society. Yeah.
Along with the integration and inclusion, I believe that the discussion of things that are considered taboo should be included in schools and all kinds of things, because there's all kinds of inequalities going on, racial inequality, marriage inequality, gender inequality, and people look at these subjects and they look at feminists, they look at people with different sexual orientations, and they completely reject them because they don't understand what's going on. And because they don't understand and they don't discuss it, they take their lack of understanding and they turn it into something ugly. They turn it into hate.
Mm-hmm.
So, I believe that.
Yeah, so I think these kinds of things can be part of your academic exploration too, right? As when we talk about academic exploration, exploring how to do something about that. And so what I'm saying is finding your passions and finding your zone is not all just about academics and career. Some of it's about how to make a difference no matter what you do, no matter where you are. So if you're a parent one day, a lot of you will be, right? You have an opportunity to influence the school system and get them to teach taboo subjects and to think about tolerance. You have maybe an ability to do that within your cultural community or within your religious community if you have one of those. There's lots of ways that you will do things in your life that are not just your career. And even as a career path, you might think about how these things could be influenced too, right? Leaders in the community make a big difference in what happens. You wanted to add to that?
Yes. Well, I went to a private school and we had a headmaster, and before we could graduate we had to have an exit interview, and he said, what's something negative about this school? And I just went off on a tangent about all of the inequalities, and he just sat there like, oh my goodness. He was like, okay, we got to do something about this because there must be some other angry people.
Okay. Yeah, so you can see lots of inequities all around you, right? In the world, in your local community, sometimes in your school community, in the 2 schools we have represented here, that will all be 1 school eventually, that there are inequities that need to be lifted out and discussed and dealt with anyway. So I want this to be about you finding your passions for a fulfilled life, right? Not just about finding your research passions or career or pathway to, the quickest pathway to medical school or law school or whatever it is thinking that you're interested in just now. So are there any other ones we should throw up here now to think about? Yes?
I wrote down greed.
Greed, I did hear some economics a couple of places, yeah. So say a little more about that.
Well, the development of the whole social class also, and I think America is one of the most notorious for this, just because, I don't know, I guess it is so technologically advanced and so economically advanced.
The American way.
Right. But there are other, especially global, there are other countries that are not as fortunate as we are, and I don't believe that we should be so greedy and be so stingy with our money. Instead, we should focus more on the overall health of our global community.
Our whole planet, because it's the only one we got.
Yeah, just ties to that, opportunities, more opportunities, because of social classes, it's really hard when you're in the bottom of the social class to get out of that class because of lack of resources, lack of exposure.
And then we have this ideal that America is about being able to really easily move up, but the data doesn't support it very well, right? It really doesn't.
In our economic system, it's like, oh, we all have an opportunity to get up, but it's up to us to try to find all the, resources and chances, which is hard, especially if you don't have much to do.
Let's see, I can't remember whose hand was up first. I think it was you.
Building off of that also globally, I think that our communication, politically speaking, should definitely have a little bit of TLC, also to build up on our green governments. Obviously, the UN and other such organizations aren't having that much success, so I think that each government individually should work on going a little bit more green for the globe, because this is the only one we've got right now.
Yeah, what country has not signed the Kyoto Treaty?
United
States. Jeez. You know, what is this? We need to, we're supposed to be a leader. We need to take some leadership action in terms of the economy, in terms of the world, in terms of green, not only green governments, but, energy, etc. Yeah. Okay, now I'm really confused. I lost track, so were you next? I think you were.
Sure.
Yeah, I think so.
So yeah, no, the United States is not the greatest country in the world. And I think that it's honestly quite juvenile that we split up in these factions that we have, and we're not really truly working together to help each other, because if we all just decided to put aside our differences and help each other, we would be able to way better improve the planet, the health of the planet, the future of mankind, exploration of space, really the endless opportunities.
In the old days, we used to say, think globally, act locally, right? So change that by what? Who's registered to vote? You! Yeah. Once you get 18, you can register to vote. Definitely do it, though, because if your voice isn't heard, you can make a real difference if your voice is heard, but if your voice is not heard, you can't make a difference. I lost, you were next, I believe, and then you.
I just wanted to point out also that so far we've just thrown around that compartmentalizing is a bad thing. I think in my personal opinion, I don't really know what I want to do. I have a very vague idea of multiple things that I want to do, and I just wanted to point out that faction gives you an identity. So there's good faction, there's bad faction. So if you want to have what you call yourself is also a compartment.
Oh, okay. That's actually a good point. So you do have multiple, all of you have multiple identities.
Yeah,
right?
but compartmentalizing isn't always particularly a bad thing.
So sometimes when I start out introductions in my classes, I ask people to make 3 I statements. I am a Democrat. I am a peace activist. I am, you know, because we all have multiple identities that we cross all the time, and we do have to think about how to negotiate, right? And they don't all work well together sometimes, so we have to figure out how to negotiate that too.
Can we do that? Can you elaborate on positive compartmentalization? Because I guess I'm just not really, I just don't really get. Keep going.
I mean, like, diversity is something that we all strive for. We strive to have a society where everything is accepted, whether it's a racial, a ethnic, a cultural, or religious issue. But you also have to keep in mind, like, you want to, when you identify yourself as one thing or multiple things. So I guess that's like positive compartmentalization. Of course, there's negative, for example, like people, like civil wars, that's a negative compartmentalization. You want to either be this one or that one.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
like,
we see an awful lot of negative in the news, right?
Yeah.
Because we see the wars that result from what look like culture clashes or religious clashes or fights over who owns this strip of land right down here in the middle. So we see a lot of that negative, but she's right, there's lots of positive influences too when you identify as, I don't know, let's
like my
see,
name's
I
Jen, I'm
am,
an artist.
I
That's
am,
fine.
and
Let's
I
take,
am,
for example, when,
yeah, an artist,
when we split into
Irish.
the United States, when we declared independence, you know, that was something that was good, kind of.
Yeah, okay, July 4th just happened, did you read the Declaration of Independence? It was in the New York Times on the back page, so you could actually, everybody could just pick it up and read it, right? And I had read it many, many times in my life, right? Many. But this time, because I was getting prepared to go and give a workshop for a group of Native American faculty, it leaped out at me that there is a paragraph in there that says that all Native Americans are bad and evil. In our own Declaration of Independence. I need to go back and edit it, just for fun. Yeah.
Do you mind if I add one more point? I'm sorry.
Sure.
I find it funny. Just this is why I brought like the positive compartmentalization thing. I find it funny that a lot of the issues that arise in the modern world, it's like it's people trying to compartmentalize themselves in what they believe is a positive way, but then they from that created negative compartments, and it's just like this whole like cycle. And you try to identify yourself as the best country, but that puts you in competition with another country, so you do bad things to that country, so you become the better one.
So bad things can come out of good classification. But you know, one of the things we can think about is how you can guard against that. How do you get 5 different religions in the Middle East to talk to one another?
That's a good question.
Right? How do you get Democrats and Republicans in the Senate and House to actually pass a budget bill? I haven't figured that one out yet.
That doesn't happen.
No, but it can happen, right? But it involves all of us putting the right kinds of pressure on to make sure that those conversations happen and that we don't get polarized and split by who we are, but we instead benefit from having different ideas come to the table. Yeah? But that's what any of you can do in what you do with your house. You can bring some of that. Not all of it. I'm not asking you to save the whole world. Just pick one part of it. Yes.
If we looked at each other as fellow human beings living on one planet, instead of, oh, you're Republican, oh, you Democrat, oh, you're Jewish, you're like all this other stuff. Like if we just like looked at each other as humans, as fellow people who have to live together, I feel like everything would be way better. But of course,
my fellow human beings.
No, and I'm not trying to say that these are easy things to solve, but I think they are part of what you are going to be the leaders in solving, right? You have had lots more opportunities than some of the people in sub-Saharan Africa and India and Pakistan, you have had opportunities to develop the skills to see across these divides and to make things happen. Whether you do it as a doctor, a lawyer, a church leader, whatever you, a businessman, whatever you decide to do, an economist, I think you have the opportunity to do something about it. You need to pick one or two, I mean, because you can't really, when I was your age, I thought I could change the whole world. You know, you gotta pick some paths to change, so you can make a difference. But if you don't think about it and you don't plan for it, then it's not gonna happen. You'll be sitting there at age 65 and what did I do with my life? Saved 2 people, operated on 750, you know, whatever. You want to think about what you do to make a difference.
Yeah, also, when we're coming across education, the way that they're teaching it has become, I don't want to say, okay, it's a little strong, maybe perverse, but it's just headed in a path where you are teaching to a test, and you are restricting a creative mind from happening.
Do you think that happens everywhere or just some?
Well, I mean,
I'm wondering.
What actually?
How many people think it's all school systems are teaching to the test?
Until we have a
Especially
human being, testing's never going to be effective.
Especially in the younger generations, when you're doing like AFCAT and all these things that are really, this is the time when you're opening someone's mind and you're already closing the door, you know?
Yeah, so you will have opportunities to influence that no matter what you do, right? Because everybody that goes has an opportunity to influence how we do the education system. Everybody that teaches, everybody that's influential in their community. This hand is up first, and then you know.
I have 2 things. I do think classification and categorization is a component of human nature. And so when you're discussing compartmentalization, I think it confers a sense of structure to the individual and the collective. I do think it does benefit us that way. We will always be that way. But yes, there are some negative implications and consequences of that. And then secondly, I am kind of compelled to object to the assumption that standardized testing is completely inaccurate. Because I do think there are immense problems with it, but at the same time, I don't think it's necessarily, I think that the material and how you perform on it should be changed, but I think it's the environment and the perception of it.
I think it's how it's used.
Exactly. If it was a stress-free environment where you could just take a test and it wouldn't even be referred to as a test. It's all a product of perception. And we go into the SAT and the ACT with such fear that this will determine the remainder of our lives. When if in actuality, if it was just something that said, like, just you're here to write on a piece of paper, it's all perception to me. So I think it can be useful if you use it correctly.
I think that you bring up a really good point, that in many of these things, it's how it's used, it's how it's applied. It's if it's held as a sorter. You know, it's like, I've heard students say over and over again that certain classes are weed out classes, right? But when I talk to the faculty, that's not what they say they're trying to do. They're trying to take you to a high level, to challenge you, right? Or at least that's what they think they're doing. And yet, students might perceive it as weeding them out because they can't do what they want to do next week. And so I think the same thing happens with tests. It's how they're used. And I mean, they are doing some silly things right now, like rolling out the Common Core tests before they actually roll out the Common Core curriculum. That's kind of dumb, but so.
I was just going to say the same thing. I think standardized testing is a tool, and a tool can be used to build or deconstruct. And so I just think that it's interesting that we have a world and an economy really that says you need to find your thing and excel in it. We have this, capitalism is find your talent and excel in it. Everyone needs to go in a different direction and go as far in that direction as you can. But in order to get into that level of competition, that level of interaction, you all have to do the same, make the same score on the same test. So we want to get to this individualization, and that's pushed as a goal, but we're all expected to take the same path there. And then on compartmentalization, I think there's a difference between individual identity and then group identity. And I think individual identity, that's good, that's comforting. But once we get into grouping, like if we say, yeah, we're all in this together, except for you guys out there. Like the problem's not the internal ethical problem. So they could be very great. Like they are useful. Yeah. But the only problem with compartmentalization, and I know we've talked about positives and negatives, just expounding on it, is that the outer boundaries. If we could have the inclusion without the outer boundaries, they'd be much more functional. But
so we can come right back to your very first comment on human nature, right? Thinking about what is human nature, what is it that makes us classify, put people in other, etc., and then how can we get over it? What can we do about it?
It's instinctual. It lets us distinguish between danger and safety, and familiarity and obscurity. And so
we weren't evolved to live in groups of 200 or less.
Yes. It was
So we could think about that too. We've now set up about 14 debates that you can have for the rest. I can hear it now in the dorm at night. Yes.
Going off what you said and what Jam Jam said. Well,
Jam Jam.
Well, like she said that we should all see each other as humans, but I think that's not human first of all because of human nature. And when you do that, you start to ignore who people are. And people are individuals, so if you just say, oh, you're a human, you don't see that I'm black or that I'm a Democrat, you're ignoring my individuality.
A piece of who you are.
Yeah, and I believe in individuality, but compartmentalizing, that's when you put yourself in a box and separate yourself from just the rest of society. So I believe that we should integrate individuals, not compartmentalize.
Wow. Okay, so that's an interesting perspective. So we can, we've also come back around to building tolerance, so being who you are by tolerating the opinions and ideas of others, or at least being able to listen to them and explain them. So I teach evolution. I know not all of you probably believe in evolution. I don't call it a belief system, I call it science, but it's okay. But I'm used to people going, well, I don't believe the science of evolution. I believe this. I can tolerate that, but if you're in my class, you still have to learn to explain evolution. It's a science class. Yeah, so that's tolerance, right? I tolerate that you do not think that this is a way to explain the world, but you still must learn to talk about my perspective as well, if you took my class.
When I said, like, we have to all live with the fact that we're all humans, I didn't mean, like, looking past the fact that you're, like, an actual person and that you have, you know, an identity. I just meant, like, hey, like, we're all in this together kind of thing. Like, if we destroy this planet, there's nothing we can do.
Before you graduate from Emory at the end, make sure that I give you my book, my list of books that everybody should read, just for fun. Some of them are old. Okay. But it's okay, we should read them anyway. The fun list includes a book called The Voyage of the Spaceship Earth, right? It was written in the 70s sometime. And it's actually about a space exploration, but the perspective of the people is as they live and get to know one another on this planet that's on this spaceship that's trying to explore the planets, they go through everything you would think that humans have gone through in terms of wars and disagreements within themselves on the ship, and all the while they're looking back at the planet, right, and trying to think about why they had to leave the Earth and how they're repeating all the mistakes over again. It's really interesting. Cool. Right, really interesting book. There's also, anybody heard of, let's see, the first book in the series is called Clan of the Caveman. No? They don't look familiar, they don't read these in high school, I don't think. They should. I'm a science fiction buff, what can I say? This is a woman by the name of Jean Auel, A-U-E-L. She has a whole series about the first encounters between humans and Neanderthals. That's all about how they lived together, how they domesticated animals, all kinds of things. Anyway, I have a lot of books today. I'll find you. What was you?
To go back to probably debate 12 out of 14. I just wanted to bring up the point that a creative individual can be sprouted from someone who grew up with discipline and education to the textbook, just as how a structured individual math or science genius can come out of someone being raised as a creative free spirit. So like, I guess like the standardized schooling system, like the school system in general, like sure people argue the fact that it's too rigid, it teaches to a test, kids don't have the room to be free or anything, but like you can still get exposure to whatever you want to be exposed to. It's just, you gotta like figure out how to be exposed to it.
So, and right now I think you have more opportunity to, your whole generation has more opportunity to do that than anyone else in the history of the world, because information is at your fingertips, or your keypad, or your phone, or whatever, right? And all you really need to do to learn anything you want to learn for the rest of your life is learn how to sort the wheat from the chaff. Because there's a lot of junk on the internet, as well as stuff that there's no valid evidence behind, right? There's crazy claims as well as validated, evidence-based claims. Your job for the next 4 years is to learn a lot that helps you sort through all of that, right? Become a lifelong learner. You will be a lifelong learner, right? But you have so much more opportunity to do that than 20 years ago when you had to walk to the library to get books, right? Carry them home in your backpack. Or where there were many people around the world that had absolutely no access to information. And they were lucky if they were taught how to make their homework and wherever they were. There are still many people like that, but that's changing too. Many more people in the world are being brought into this information age. And we also need to help all of them learn to sort the wheat from the chaff so that they don't just listen to Fox News, that they actually listen to reality news reports from various perspectives, right? So that they don't set the little channel so they only hear one side of the story, right? Because only hearing one side of the story is what leads to those breaks between people. And there's wars and there's misunderstandings and there's identity fights instead of identity understandings. That's cool. Who hasn't said anything that wants to say something? We have a big list up here. And then more. I didn't write them all down, so yes.
Something also that's important is that since there are a lot of people who, miss out on this, resources and such, they don't even have the opportunity to be represented in any sort of way. Like, there are so many missing voices that we don't get to hear that even they would like to be heard, but they aren't even given the possibility. So in regards to that whole social status, we should be able to expand it towards the people that don't have their opportunity to be heard.
To help people have voices, right? And that's the whole point of some of the little microeconomic loans to help women start in various countries, start businesses so that they can have control of finances where their voice hasn't been heard, where there are many places where people's voice hasn't been heard.
Yeah, like in our economic system, like the 1% own more than 50%. You know.
There's another debate for to add to the.
Here we go.
Here we go. Do we have anybody that's in? No.
I was an economic expert.
Oh yeah, that macro.
So there really are, economic divides and social inequities that we can all help address. You go here, here, here. Okay.
I think something to include with the social inequity is that I feel for a lot of the lower classes, their information gets perverted, especially when, I guess because upper class people usually, they have like a different mindset, like I guess they change and they become greedy, not all of them, but most of them like change that way. And so
some of them were born that way, but it's okay.
Yeah, it wants to see you do well, like especially in those places.
Okay, so social inequities that address the ability to move in different directions.
Yeah, and like when it's, I feel like when something can be easily attained, but you don't know it can be because you've been told the wrong thing. That's
yeah. So people can be oppressed, pushed down because they're not encouraged to think that they can move up or do something new.
Okay, I don't mean to disagree with like most of the people in the room, but I'm just gonna say it anyway. I feel like I'm like a really like independent person. If I want something, I'm gonna go for it. And a lot of you are saying that like there's a lot of things in society that just prevent everybody from doing something. Like if you're poor and like you want to be a doctor, or like if like you can do it. I mean like I don't know. I mean everybody's talking about there's so many barriers, and it's like you can cross them. Like nobody's holding you back. You know.
I think you can cross them, right? I think it's just harder sometimes. Right? But there are challenges to crossing.
If you're poor, it's more challenging to become a doctor than it would be for someone who has millions laying around, because you need to take out loans to go to college. You need to go to
Actually,
school.
that's if you even get to that opportunity. Because there are some people that don't even have the opportunity to think.
But you know, I think you make a very good point. I think you make a very good point that you can overcome barriers. People in many places have overcome barriers. I know people who started out in a very, very poor economic and educational and other situation who are doctors, who are leaders of the Western world. I mean, we have many examples of people who overcame barriers. Nonetheless, it wouldn't hurt if we bashed down some of the barriers a little bit. Easier, right? So I would say you've made a really, really good point that everybody needs to think about, but that we also can help make it a little easier for people from all walks of life to have those opportunities. Now I've really lost track. I think okay, thank you. Thank you, appreciate it. He had his hand up for a while too.
I have a couple of things, but a couple of things I will say. Back to what you were saying with the social classes and the rich and the poor. Some rich people, yes, they've had the money, they have old money, like it has been in their family for years, but there are the few that have earned their money and you have no right to take their money. If you work hard for it, you keep it and you do what you please with it. You can't do that, in my opinion. That's my opinion. Another thing, going back to the education system, I feel like in America, a lot of people, I mean, even me, I'm not gonna lie, being like, and we all pretty much had like a lot of resources and everything with the higher classes that we did take in the, I guess the route we took in college and everything, in high school, not college yet, but in high school.
Yes.
But I feel like, and even myself, I took advantage of, I didn't take advantage of everything that was given to me, and I think that's a problem because I have been to many third and second world countries, and I have cousins who tell me that America is heaven and they are living in hell. I've had cousins, and it literally was about to bring me to tears because they don't understand America, because it's not easy to live here, like especially if you come here. And I've had cousins who just actually recently came from Egypt. They did not speak a lick of English, and I'm sitting here trying to teach them English. It's not easy. So yes, we do have to help them as much as possible, but it's just, it's gonna take a long time.
Yeah, I think you're right? But I also think we have to figure out government patterns, which went back to 2 or 3 things ago, about thinking about the government systems that we choose and how we make them work, that provide sufficient funds for central governments to do things like that for people, right? Which means that you don't get to keep all your money.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that it should be greedy, but I mean.
Yeah, so it's not all about greed. It's not all about people being greedy and wanting to keep everything that they got. There is some of that, but that's not all of that. Some of it's about we've chosen government systems and economic value systems for Western nations that reward greedy economic choices. Well, you are definitely next.
Yeah,
I skipped you twice, I know I did.
I agree wholeheartedly with Kennedy and Lena. Like, there has to be a sense of independency, but in America, social mobility is such an issue, and especially in positions in government, that's becoming a bias. So when you have really, really rich people governing our counties and states and our country, you can't empathize with the lower class people. So education, they went to boarding school, they can't help with public school reform. Like, it's just, it's not gonna
I mean, they can if they want to think about it.
If they want to think
sometimes
about it, they
don't,
don't want
right?
to.
Sometimes they just don't.
It's just a problem with
One of the last, in the presidential candidates that went up against Obama, there was one who routinely talked about his 5 homes, right? Just like, oh, okay, someone's done like one. I went to college.
I mean, there's something to be said about a country that needs to make an amendment to make sure that people aren't giving themselves pay raises.
Healthcare.
You know?
Yes. Congress should not get paid until they pass the budget bill, period, end of sentence. If I was in charge of the world, I would not pay them. I would not. Here and then.
Oh, do you want to go first?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, did I miss you?
No, it's okay. It's good.
My brain is a little fried.
Another thing about independence, just to build off on it, is that a lot of, I think that the issue kind of roots within the fact that our education system in the poor areas are not as opportunity accepting. Like, for example, some of you will be coming into Emory with the pre-med track, but then you could change your mind. The people in poorer areas would say, I want to be a doctor. They may not have the full idea of what that is. Like, we don't have the full idea of what it is. And then when they get there, they might want to change their mind. So it's all about exposure as well in the education systems across the nation, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot with exposure, but just imagine, listen to the creative artists we had speaking about their passions earlier. Are there ways with poetry and art and music that we can convey opportunities to others? I think so.
Yeah.
I think we can, even if what you're conveying to them is the opportunity to see what a doctor really is, or what a lawyer really does, not just like going to the real.
I was just gonna, see, mine's kind of like a bridge between Kennedy's and Andy's. I agree with Andy that the social mobility is too strong of barriers, but I feel, since in my personal belief, that as America has evolved over the past 30 or 40 years, a lack of motivation and desire to kind of change and make your own American dream has drastically dropped to zero, because we've been taught as children that basically most of us, that everything's given to you. You look for things to get handed out to you, and you're not like drove, and you don't have like that inner desire to make something for yourself.
Yeah, so it's something we can teach our children.
I feel like that's where parents are lacking, because they're not installing, or not installing, but like showing up their children that if you want something, that you're going to have to work for it. Nothing like we talked about with a PhD with 200 papers and everybody freaked out about it. That's why PhDs is not with everybody's name. Not everybody has a PhD, because it
Because
takes a
you
lot
have
of
to
work to
plan
get to.
for it, because you have to think about what it takes to get to what you want. But not everybody has the opportunity to make those plans, right? So one of the things we're going to try and do, and oh my God, in the next half hour, that should be fun. I guess when I come back next week is figure out some planning steps that can get you toward one of these things that you want to do. You look like you're having too much fun with this, though. So I don't even know where to start.
I agree with Kennedy that, we all have the power to go after what we want, and it's really up to us, where there's a will, there's a way. But I think our government could definitely do a better job with our school system. I have met high school seniors who do not know how to read, and I had a literacy camp where kids do not know how to read, and they come from really bad socioeconomic situations. And that's hard to believe that's happening in America, the land of the free and all that. But I think we should address the own problems that we have in our state before we go knocking on other people's doors.
Okay, so you think we should act locally and then think globally. That's okay, right? Both of those work. So yeah, so for example, there is a group called, I can't think of its initials. Emory Reads is what it's called anyway. There's a group right here on campus that was formed by students to do outreach to a number of different communities, and they teach children to read and sometimes teach parents of children to read when the parents don't speak English yet. There's a number of ways you can make a difference if you choose to. So I'm trying to give you some ideas of things you might put on your plan when you think about, how do I want to make a difference? How do I want to change the world? Well, not just your career, not just what courses you're going to take, but how do you want to make a difference?
Going off what Tyler and what Kennedy said, like a lot of higher class people have, not all of them, but a lot of them have what's the word? A sense of entitlement where they feel like they're better and they deserve better. And then seeing a person from a low class situation being able to reach what they've reached or surpass that, it angers them, and they feel like, oh, I had all these resources and I should be better. So why is this person doing exactly what I'm doing or being better than me? So that's where that's when they start trying to create barriers to like prevent that from happening. They try to prolong the process. And I feel like that's where a problem is.
Well, maybe, again, a lot of it's back to tolerance and understanding, right? A lot of it's easy to critique other groups and classes, and it's much harder to understand them, to begin to accept their ideas. So all of us can work at that. On campus, with groups that you encounter, and at home, sometimes your parents don't understand a lot of things that sometimes your families don't. I mean, I was constantly explaining things to my family when I went off to college, because I was one of the first ones to go to college. I'm the oldest of 11 kids. I'm from a little rural community, right? And nobody even understood what I was doing. Why would I do that? Why would I go away from our town? Not be on the farm.
I actually had a question. I think that like when I'm listening to what everybody is saying, I'm thinking there's something that I'm missing. So like I wanted to ask, like in America, like aren't we all offered the same opportunities, or is that something that the country wants you to believe?
So different school systems. School systems from poorer communities don't have the same educational opportunities as, say, a school in a very rich neighborhood. Because a school in a very rich neighborhood would have loads of AP courses that you could take, new textbooks, new technologies with their libraries. Whereas poorer neighborhoods may not have the same type of textbook opportunities.
How are our schools funded? Okay, so taxing people in that district. So if it's a suburban or a rich district, There's much more tax base to support the school system. And also, upper class and middle class parents tend to give extra money and create school foundations to raise the money for field trips and et cetera, et cetera. If the school is set in the middle of downtown Atlanta in the southeast, there may not be any money in that community. So the government gives some, but there's no support tax base to give the extras, right? So very different. And we could, in the richer districts or in the federal government as a whole, but the state government as a whole, say we need to enrich these opportunities here. But we don't often complete that.
Okay, I understand with education, but like what about other things? Like give like another example. Like I get the education example. Like I don't get other things. I don't know.
Where are the
That's such the foundation to everything, you know.
Yeah, so if you
Like
if you don't have a great background in education, it's going to be harder for you to get a job somewhere.
Yeah, she wants you to go beyond education. Are there job opportunities that are different in poor communities?
Yes.
Yes.
You know, base jobs versus jobs that require an advanced degree, you know what I mean?
You won't find the top 5
But I think that even tracks back to education, because if you don't have that foundation.
Yeah, the top 5 accounting firms in New York, it's not in Newark, right? Or Poughkeepsie.
Yeah. You won't find it. Yeah, you won't find it in the Bronx. You'll find it in the nice Upper East Side.
Yeah. So even within a big city, often they're confined communities, and it's really hard to cross some of those boundaries. The opportunities are not equal. If you think about, let's take Atlanta. We're in Atlanta. So if you lived in downtown Atlanta and you were poor, and the job that, but you were qualified for a job because you'd gotten some education and training, but you wanted a really nice technical job that paid well, and they're all out in the suburbs. How are you going to get there? Where's the bus line stop? There's Atlanta, and there's 285. There's 10 counties that touch on Atlanta, and the bus lines don't cross that boundary in many places. So if you are poor and you live in the inner city, you can't get out there to where that job is. Even if that job is the only job that you can find, and it's a poor job, you know, serving at McDonald's or whatever, the bus doesn't go to all those places. Or it takes you 2 hours to get there. Right? So there's a lot of inequities that could be resolved. Why, you might ask? Why doesn't the bus go all the way out there?
Pay for the gas and stuff.
Part of it's taxes, part of it's discrimination. Every time bus service all the way out to Cobb goes on the agenda, you begin to hear racist objections to extending bus service from the city out to Cobb County. Don't want those people coming into my neighborhood. Right? Sorry, it's still out there. There's still lots of things we have to resolve.
Okay, there's like 30 things I say. All right.
I'm not going to even get to the rest of my PowerPoint.
Sorry.
All right.
It's just been building. With the whole like poetry thing that you said earlier, I wrote a 5-page poem in 10th grade about propaganda in other countries, and it got rejected. So I'm a little salty about that still. But
I have a solution for that too.
Oh really?
I have the grant that funds this program that we're just starting here is the 5th try. Not just try again, try again. Right? Resubmit.
Also, sometimes, I don't know, it's a thing that happens all the time. It's not the skills that you have, but it's who you know.
Yeah.
So there's unskilled people working in places where people who are skilled should be. And about like the whole thing with like rising up and everything, like my mom is a single mother, and she has been since my father died when I was 9. So when she was working, she was a teacher, and the South Carolina, well, the Columbia school system is terrible because they cut and they cut and they cut. So for years,
A Republican government, sorry. Sorry for the Republicans in the audience.
so for years, up until I was in like 11th grade, my family, a family of 3, were living off of $12,000. You can't survive with $12,000 a year. So my mom went out and she looked for jobs every single day until she rose to where she is today and she works for the government. So I feel like even though you kind of hit a bump somewhere, you can still overcome it and be independent.
Yeah, you can, if you have the inner resources and resilience, right? Not everybody has that. We can probably help them develop it, but yes. If you have the inner resources and resilience to keep on trucking. Yeah? And I wanted to, I put that up there big because one of the things we'll talk about in your building your plan for your 4 years at Emory and beyond, is one of the things that's really important always is to network. It's not taking advantage to network and know people. It's finding out what's real, right? There's positive and non-positive aspects, like back here again, we got positive and negative, of networking and about who you know. Yes, there's a lot of who you know in the world, but that's because we trust people we know and understand, and it does influence our decision making. So there's good points to that, as well as negative. That's why we have laws, right? That's why there's anti-nepotism rules, right? You can't hire your sister unless you own the company, in which case you can hire your sister. Or whatever. Okay, now I'm completely lost. She's had her hand up for a while. Thank you, I appreciate it.
One, like, and this like hits, this has always been a big deal for me, the whole like, yes you can, like there is social mobility and if you are poor and you want to be a doctor, it's possible. But you can only do so much. There are only 3 hours in the day, and the likelihood that you actually be able to 3 hours. Sorry, 3 hours a day. There's only 24 hours a day. If you're working, if you're at work for 3 to 6 of those, that's 3 to 6 hours that you can't do something that somebody else doing. That's where the 3 came from. Just so you know.
It's all right. I interpreted it as 30.
30, yeah,
sorry.
sorry.
Somebody say something about me.
Yeah, I know how many hours there are in the day. I'm sorry. There's only so many hours in a day, and there's this huge romanticized, fight-with-the-mouth belief that you can work your butt off and have a super great attitude and get where everyone else can get. That's just not true. Without some help, you can't do it. If you don't speak English, or if you work 3 jobs a day and pay for your family, you can't save up and go to college because your family is using the lights. Your family is eating your paycheck. It's just not possible. And yeah, you can work your butt off, but you can't do it yourself. Like whenever, in some recent elections, we had someone with 5 houses suggest that, well, kids can just work their way through college.
Like you did.
But like you did, like you know, you can work hard, and no one's entitled to anything. And you can work hard and get far, but there's only so much you can do, and people have this huge expectation of people to do stuff that just isn't realistic. And if you're not willing to help people out a little bit, you can't expect that much from them. Even if someone does work their way through college, they're going to work their way through community college. They're not going to work their way through Emory. You're going to have to get some.
Without financially.
I'm working my way through
My life.
Emory.
Yeah, I was going to say there is
Like,
financial
it is
aid.
possible. I'm working my way through the school. And like, you cannot say that it's not.
Okay, not entirely. You're getting financial aid or something. You're not going to go to McDonald's every day after class.
Yeah, no, but I am getting a job. I'm working right now. I have to take weeks off to come
Many
here.
students here
It is
work.
definitely possible.
Don't take offense to Kai trying to demean your individual abilities. Just, I think what we need to understand is that we're all pieces of various things. You know what I mean?
No, that
like
is-
we're a culmination of so many influences and personalities and ideologies. And so, I think what Kai is trying to communicate is that don't perceive it as though just because you did it that it was entirely you. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You can work there, and I believe you can.
And I just think the image of people like saying, well, if you want me to be a doctor, you're gonna have to help me out. That's not the case. There's not anyone who has those kind of who has those kind of goals that's not gonna do any work, doesn't plan to do any work. They're already working really hard. You have to give them some help.
And
yeah, and that's why networking is so important. If you set up your network isn't completely bad. Like
no, I wasn't trying to say.
No, I understand. I'm sorry. I got really heated really fast. But you can go and you can make the connections and you can work. Like if you're from the poorest neighborhood in the poorest part of this nation, you have to put in a lot of work, and sure it'll take time and it'll take networking and it'll take a whole bunch of factors.
It might take longer.
It might even take longer than the traditional 4 years. You can do it. Like it's not impossible. It's not some crazy out of the world
the term
idea.
individual with independence. That's what I would suggest. Because just because you do something individually doesn't mean you weren't dependent on other external influences. You know what I mean?
Well, I think another way to put that might be, we don't have to make it so that everybody has to do it all by themselves. We have a government and a culture that can provide support for people to allow them to get through. It's like we have loans so that people can borrow money to buy a house. We don't have a situation where you have to save the money to buy your house first. But we also have repayment of those things, right? So we have loans to support college, we have other kinds of things, financial aid systems, etc. So it doesn't have to be all one or the other. We can formulate a system that works for the good of all people. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have any input yourself. No, I don't think it should. I don't think anything should be handed to anybody, because it's hard to value things that you've only been given and that you haven't worked for. It's just that we have to remember that some people do have to work harder than others. I mean, last week I was with a group of faculty, well, yesterday actually, I was with a group of faculty that are from tribal institution colleges, so Native American colleges in the United States, right? And their students in their freshman classes range in age from typical 18, 19 to 40. Some of them have never had a full education before. Some of them have been to only tribal schools. Some of them haven't been off the reds. Right? They don't have all people from equal opportunities in their classes. But the mission of those faculty is to try and help each and every one of their students achieve the best that they possibly can. Right? That's the kind of distinction I think we need to think about. Right? As we plan out, I mean, you are going to be world leaders. You're going to get to set what governments do, or what communities do, or what local school systems do, or what local hospital systems do, or maybe even will eventually have a single-payer health plan system like Canada does. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I pray this is showing again. My bias. I want everybody to have health care as a right. Can't help myself. So I know that we've stirred up lots of interesting things this afternoon, and that we could organize this into a debate. And we can keep this on all night long. And we haven't even gotten past slide 2 in the PowerPoint. Oh well.
I can feel the heat in my belly right now.
Okay. So what I think maybe we should do with this is try and, let's see if we can't bring it together in the context of what I want to do with the planning exercise. So that you can at least start on this, because what I don't want to do is give you all 5 assignments next week. Right? I want to give you 1 or 2 to think about today. So the place we were going to go after this, after my story, which we didn't even get to. Oh well, it's okay. It's a long and winding road. We'll find out. The place we were going to go after this is I have this exercise, it's called 3 circles. And one of the circles is what would you like to see change in the world to make a difference. So we were playing right now with one of the circles, and the idea is to get you thinking about where you might be able to find your passions. But the other 2 circles are outlined on that little sheet. I'm going to erase some of these from there. One of them is, what are you good at? Okay, what I'm going to ask you to think about before for the exercise that's defined there on exercise 1 is, what are you good at right now? What are you, and you also need to think about what you're not so good at. What you're good at, what you're not so good at. Because sometimes what you're not so good at is absolutely essential for you to progress, right? So you need to think about, what do I need to do to get better at that? Things out here. So for example, let's see, what am I good at? I know what I'm not so good. I'm not so good at managing time, obviously. With all of us, that's okay. This was fun. Okay, so you think about what you're good at, and write, scribble in that circle, right? As many things as you can think of. And think of some things that fall outside of that, right? And then we're going to think about how you might want to expand that circle over the next 4 years. So for example, how many people have had an anthropology class? 1. Okay, so he might know if he's good at anthropology. Are you good at anthropology?
Regarding like my mark in the class?
No,
Or if I
your
enjoy it?
definition.
Yeah, I was good at yeah.
You were good at learning that material.
I was good at learning material. I was, okay. Was that-
Rest of you don't even know what's in it, I bet. What's in an anthropology class? You don't know. Study of humans? Yeah, that's in Psych 2.
Isn't it the history of past cultures? Like you
Could
said,
be.
group behavior.
It's a subfield of
Yeah.
anthropology. Yeah, could be. If I had taken an anthropology when I was a freshman, I'd be an anthropologist, not a biologist.
Yeah.
I would.
It's a lot of
I took it my senior year, and I really, really am sorry that I waited that long. I would have changed my whole career path if I had taken it year 1. Right? So you're going to think about some things academically, socially, experientially. What activities do you want to get good at? Right? What things are you going to do to expand that circle? Okay? Another one is, you watch how I draw these 2. Okay? What do you like to do? You start with, what do you like to do now? And that's also some of the passions and getting in the groove thing that we talked about earlier. Some of that, we did a little piece of this. What do you like to do? What things really make you happy? What things you like to do all the time? But at the same time, you might think about what you don't like to do, right? Like, I love a clean house, but I don't like to clean a house. Right? So, I like to sing, but I'm no good at it, so I probably shouldn't, at least not out loud. In the shower, probably okay. So, like, things that you like to do and that you don't like to do. But some of those things that you don't like to do have to be done. Right? You might not like statistics. You might not like organic chemistry. You might not like physics. Yeah, if you want to be a doctor or a PhD in biology or a researcher in computational science, you've got to do them anyway. So you have to figure out how to change something that you don't like into a skill that you need to develop and make yourself learn to like it. right? And you might notice that there's overlap here. Trying to find things that you're good at and you like to do. And then we were working on this third circle, which is make a difference. That makes a difference. What kind of things will make the world a better place? We've already done that part of the exercise. But what I'm gonna get you to think about time and time again is, first of all, how are you going to expand these circles? How are you going to find more things you like to do? How are you going to find more things that might make a difference? How are you going to learn about the things that we brought up, the millions of things we brought up here? How are you going to learn more about economics and how the world is structured? Or how are you going to learn more about health activism and what needs to be done to offer health care in a better system than we currently have? How are you going to find more about teaching acceptance as you go through the next 4 years? Right? So how are you going to expand all of these circles? And then I'm going to try and push you every once in a while as you see me over the next 4 years, and you will see me over the next 4 years. I'm going to push you to push them together every once in a while. And look at the place where what you're becoming good at and what you're learning to like to do and what you think makes a difference overlap. And because when you find that place, that's where you'll find your passion. And notice I didn't say passion, I said passions. Because each and every one of you will find many passions. You may have to choose between them sometimes. And that's why we're going to do a plan. So I want you to think about exercise 1 and 2 and try and write them out and submit them to, what is the group name?
Glue passions.
Glue passions.
Henry,
Can you specify the 2 sentences you want here?
So I see assignment 1 and assignment 2 is going to
Oh, Dr. Marks, when did you like this
time? When am I supposed to come back? Do you know?
Does someone have the schedule?
Yeah, so somewhere next week.
Are we doing the first assignment and the second assignment?
Yeah, why don't we just do the first one? Just the first one. But that gets to the point of writing the letter saying how you're going to expand your circles, right?
Okay.
And then we'll play with the rest of it next time.
Of the worksheets?
Oh, I did have one.
So 22nd is your turn. 22nd.